This podcast is brought to you by Reverb, the online marketplace for new, used, and vintage music gear. Learn more at reverb.com.
Hey, it's Larry Crane. Welcome to the Tape Op Podcast. Hailing from Edmonton, Canadian electronic pop duo Purity Ring made a splash with their debut album, Shrines. The release was a document of Corin Roddick and singer Megan James' long-distance collaboration and Corin's electronic music experimentation and exploration. Made entirely at home, the band's latest and third release, Womb, debuted at #1 on the electronic music charts. We sat down with Corin to discuss the making of both Shrines and Womb, distance recording, and happy accidents. Enjoy.
How did you get into recording? I mean, I understand that you at one point you worked at a recording studio.
So I first got interested in recording, I think probably around the age of maybe 12 or 13. I had like just some janky software on my terrible computer at the time, and I started like trying to do sort of remixes, I guess, of whatever music I was listening to at the time, and that didn't work out very well because I was just kind of so limited with what I was working with. So from there, I kind of wanted to check out like getting some microphones and into using a proper DAW and all that. So yeah, I played in a lot of bands and was making music through junior high and high school. And a lot of my friends kind of knew me as the guy that had some recording gear in his basement. So naturally, I kind of ended up being the person that was like recording all of the demos and various things like that for like people I knew in my school and also kind of like elsewhere around the city. And yeah, I just kind of kept going with that. And eventually after I graduated high school, I started working just at a local studio as an engineer. Even though I didn't really have any formal training or anything, I was still pretty much trying to figure it out as I went.
Were you just doing whatever bands came through the door, or were you starting to bring bands in and produce them?
Honestly, it was just kind of whatever was available. It was a lot of just word of mouth, like friends of mine that were in bands, and basically this is in Edmonton, Alberta, so it's not. There's a decent local music scene, but it's quite isolated as a city. It's not like people are gonna really travel there to like work at a studio. So it was kind of slim pickings in a way. And I would pretty much record anything that was willing to pay the bills. So I ended up working on a lot of stuff that I wasn't exactly excited about. But from time to time, I would get to work on some music made by my friends that I would be more excited about. But that was usually the stuff that I was either doing for free or, very, very low fees.
Yeah. Just to kind of get back to Purity Ring, it's my understanding that Shrines was your first attempt at making an electronic focused record. So is that based in fact, or did you just like, how did that all sort of come about? Did you just end up buying some gear that you were interested in and learn to use it? Or like, how did that all kind of happen?
Well, yeah, like I said, I had sort of a background already in recording, but it was almost entirely based around, recording acoustic drums and guitars, pianos, that kind of thing. I had always been interested in electronic music. I'd always really admired sounds like that I'd heard in records, and I didn't really know how they were made. But once I got my hands on a copy somehow of Ableton, I just started kind of dabbling with that. And I was on tour with my friend's band at the time. I think when I was 18 or 19, and I had a lot of time to myself on the road. So I would just as we were driving from city to city, I was just kind of trying to learn the ins and outs of Ableton and started messing around with making some beats and that kind of thing. So, but obviously, like my background that I knew a little bit about, like how to use EQ and reverb and compression and that kind of stuff, made it so stuff started to sound passable probably more quickly than if I had no prior experience with working with audio, of course. But yeah, that's when I really kind of started to get into electronic production and sort of scratch the surface of it. Was like, and some of those first tracks I made actually were songs that ended up on the Shrines record.
And so I have a couple questions just to follow up on that. I mean, so what bands were you kind of listening to at that time that kind of piqued your interest in the genre?
I really loved Bjork. There's in terms of electronic stuff, like her album Vespertine has like a lot of really kind of glitchy, like textured synth sounds, like mixed with kind of more organic, like harp and piano sounds. That's a record that I listened to all the time when I was in high school. Yeah, and then other than that, like I was listening to a lot of Radiohead, and obviously like Kid A record has like a lot of really kind of unique electronic sounds that I had never heard anything like that before. So that really made me want to get into it. And also like I loved a lot of just R&B and hip hop, and all of that stuff was made on MPCs and samplers. So just that kind of general workflow of like chopping things up and programming drums really appealed to me.
And was that your approach on Shrines, that you were taking and manipulating samples, or were you creating your own samples? Because the records that you're talking about, especially Radiohead, like Kid A and Amnesiac, those are like really kind of hybridized electronic, organic acoustic records. So what was your approach to making Shrines?
It was just honestly a lot of experimenting with not much of a plan. I started by I thought it was quite interesting, like using a lot of manipulated vocals kind of as samples that worked kind of to create the backbone and like texture of tracks. So that was kind of the first breakthrough I had, was that like I could take little snippets of vocals and chop them up and kind of and turn those into pieces that kind of stitched the beat together. And then the other sort of component of it that like it took some messing around to get there, but realizing that worked really well with more kind of hip hop sounding beats, like the 808 snares and the hi-hats and such. Because at that time I hadn't really heard that type of drum production, used outside the genre of hip hop at all. So I kind of stumbled upon combining those things by accident, and I was like, oh, this actually works out okay. So I just kind of kept going with that, and then just blending in a lot of like synth sounds and stuff that had always appealed to me, like the classic sound of like Moog bass lines and kind of like 80s sounding stabs and plucky sounds.
I'm curious because I'm just learning Ableton now. I've been working on Pro Tools for since it was a thing. What do you find to be the sort of advantages for you in working in live versus like a traditional DAW?
Well, yeah, I came from working in Cubase before that, because that's what I would use when I was recording bands and the music that I used to make. So yeah, it was definitely a bit of a learning curve changing over to Ableton. But once I started getting used to it, it was like every little thing that used to take me, 5 or 10 steps in Cubase, I could accomplish with 1 or 2 steps in Ableton. It's just as very kind of intuitively laid out, especially when it comes to electronic programming. I would say the downside of it though is it's really not good at all for like actually doing recorded takes, like especially if it's multi-track, no chance at all. But even just like trying to do like 10 takes of a vocal and then comp it to the best parts is an incredible pain in Ableton. It's not really built out for that. But when it comes to kind of just, I still do that in like lately I've been using Studio One for comping the vocals, because they have a really nice comping feature in there. If Ableton had comping, it would be the chef's kiss of DAWs for sure.
What were some of your triumphs and pitfalls of making that first record? I mean, what do you hear when you go back and listen to it now?
When I listen, that's a good question. When I listen to it now, I hear a lot of like just experimentation and what sounds like someone kind of figuring things out as they go along, which is, I think, what makes that record have a lot of charm, because I could never make a record like that again, no matter how hard I tried, just due to having a quite limited knowledge of what I was trying to achieve while I was doing it. So yeah, I don't know what the pitfalls, maybe, like I was really definitely relying heavily on a few different effects that were giving me results that I liked quickly, which were like very dramatic sidechain compression, a lot of like distorted reverb, using just like the stock Ableton reverb on like low quality setting, because I just didn't really like know better, I guess. But in hindsight, that's kind of what gives it its charm as well. Like all the reverb kind of has this like lo-fi distorted quality to it that just to me sounded good at the time, and it does still sound good. But it's I would never do anything like that now, because there's just so many better options.
Got to be sort of interesting, puts you in an interesting place as you move forward from that record, have it been successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that there is kind of an odd thing there that when you make that first album and you're really kind of figuring it out as you go, and figuring out who you are as an artist, there's all these kind of experimental results that happen of like trying something out for the first time, and like that can never happen again. That's kind of the crazy thing about it. It's like when you're just making that album, it's a good feeling, because you're feels like you're kind of able to express yourself in a way you haven't before, which I do remember that being really rewarding when we were making it. But I wasn't thinking at all about how I was sort of making those sounds from like a place of like I guess innocence and unknowingness that I would never be able to recapture again, as my knowledge of the medium grew. So but it's cool that people appreciate that as it is, but it can be disappointing when like certain people become so fixated on like something that you did. Like they're like, why can't you just keep doing that again? And it's like, well, actually, I mean, no matter how much I try, it's just impossible, because like I can't recreate those circumstances.
Yeah. Well, and then, what's the point of making more than one record if you're just going to make the same record again? It's like,
yeah, absolutely.
Do you pretty much make all your records at home now?
Yep. This last album, Womb, we made pretty much entirely at home. I have like a little production and mixing setup, and a little vocal booth, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Like we engineer, produce, mix it all here. I got the mixes to about 90%, and then since the acoustics in my place aren't the greatest, I finished the last kind of 10% of the mixing process at a friend's studio who has kind of like more of a really well-treated room, just so I could kind of make sure I wasn't missing anything. But yeah, other than that, everything was done just at my spot here.
Was this record made where you had sort of fully created tracks and then passed those along to have vocals put on, or was it more of a collaborative process? Or
it's a combination, really. Like some songs, as you say, have been pretty much just like I made a full instrumental piece, and then Megan just comes up with like vocals to accompany it. But other songs have been more like, I'll kind of make like a loop, and then Megan will come up for something with that part, and then like I'll kind of see what she did with that, and then find where the song should go from there. And then it kind of becomes like a back and forth, more like collaborative process. And then some of them have been like actually vocals first, and then kind of building the track around that. So it's a big mix of things.
And are you guys doing this remotely? Are you in the room together, or some people like to work in different ways. I mean, are you somebody that likes to have a little bit of space to create, or do you like having somebody there to work it out with?
Yeah, we both work on our own most of the time. Like when I'm kind of coming up with ideas to start a track off, I'm almost always working on my own, and I'll send stuff to Megan, and she'll come up with ideas as well, and then we'll kind of get together and be like, hey, well, what do you have? What do I have? And then start to combine them. And then there comes, so I would say like, songs start out quite remotely, and then as they kind of start to form into songs, it becomes a much more like in the same room collaborative kind of process. And
record making has changed so much with the advent of the DAW, and I mean, this is not a new thing, but it's certainly really, God, anybody can do it now, especially when like every Mac gets shipped with, recording software.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing that everyone has that access now.
Yeah, I mean, so the tools have really sort of democratized the whole process. I mean, it's not access. I mean, it is if you want to get into more of the high-end stuff. But would you ever make another record in a traditional recording studio? And like, are there things that you miss about a more traditional recording studio rather than being at home?
Yeah, since I came more from that background of being in a studio and like, having like a live room where, acoustic sounds really carried, and you could use the room as an instrument as well. And just kind of having more gear around to experiment with. I do miss that a bit, and it hasn't like, disappeared from my process entirely. Like I do still use a little bit of outboard gear here and there, for more kind of specific tasks. But it's possible that, I could see down the line, if we wanted to go in that direction, maybe incorporating more like larger, like live room sounding kind of things. Because the way we're doing stuff right now, it's definitely not possible to get those kind of sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to your records, I could definitely see the value of you creating your own drum sounds in a space and using them, bringing them back into your process for another sonic texture.
Yeah, definitely. That's something I've thought about more. Because actually, like, I think programming drums is probably my least favorite part of the entire process, because sometimes somehow it's just like always really difficult for me to make it sound good. So I've thought about ways to incorporate more like, I guess, live. Maybe I'd probably turn them kind of into loops and process them to fit more into of an electronic sounding kind of the way it would mix together. But yeah, that's somewhere where I could see things going, like really using sounds that are more organic to begin with, and building off of those rather than just dropping things onto a grid, because that can get a little bit monotonous after a while.
Do you mind talking a little bit about some of these, some of the tracks on the record?
Yeah, I'd love to.
How about Pink Lightning?
Yeah, so that song was one of the last ones we finished for the album, and it had a lot of like kind of happy accidents, I guess, the way it came together. Like starting out with the way it starts out with the low pitch down vocal, like that was never there originally, and then I accidentally slowed down. I think I was trying to do something differently entirely, but I ended up manipulating the vocal kind of in the wrong direction and slowing it down to half speed. which sounded kind of quite strange and ominous on its own. So that became kind of like the first third of the song. And then at the end of the song, it changes to a new, it's like the same chorus over again, but over top of a different chord progression. And that again was another total just kind of happy accident of, I had like an old, somewhere in the Ableton session, like, far off to the right, I had like an old bits and pieces from when I was like first putting the beat together. And I think I accidentally copied and pasted like a scratch vocal for the chorus over top of like kind of the old graveyard bits. And it really meshed with that old chord progression in a way that I never would have tried to put them together, or Megan never would have sang that over that progression to begin with. So there's a lot of kind of things where it's just accidentally clicking on the wrong thing and then be like, oh wait, that actually sounds pretty cool. There might be something to that.
Everything is spinning beneath till it falls. Mother later.
How about I Like the Devil?
Yeah, that one I think was maybe the very first bit of music we started working on in the sessions for this album that actually ended up making it onto the record. And yeah, that one's pretty different for us, the way it has kind of a more like 4 on the floor, really driving rhythm, and then like gets really sparse with the piano. So yeah, I'm not too sure what to say about that one specifically. But it's more kind of like almost industrial a little bit, the way it came together. And yeah, we thought, we're like, oh, is the whole album going to sound like this? We don't know. And then it ended up being kind of the only one that sounded like that, which is like kind of funny.
So do you track a bunch of songs and then edit it down to, what ends up going on the record? Or did you kind of start with the record and then work on that?
We don't finish a lot of songs that we think won't make it in the end. I would say usually, like, when we're in the middle of working on a song, we'll both agree that it is going to go on the album, and then we'll see that song through to completion. But if a song is kind of like in the midst of coming together and we're feeling a little unsure about it, we'll usually just kind of set it aside and work on something that we're more focused on. So no, we don't like finish 30 songs completely and then just choose 10. It's kind of like we just end up with a graveyard of kind of half-finished bits, and then a handful of songs that are actually complete.
Are those things you end up going back to, or?
Yeah, no, a lot of them become useful. Like some of them we revisit at the end, and it's like, oh, that actually is a really, maybe not the whole song, but like just this section of the song is really promising. So kind of build a new track out of just like kind of one part. Or often one of our favorite things to do is like sort of frankensteining things together. Sometimes, like, if we're really stuck getting, say, like a verse or a bridge or something for one song, we'll go and look at the graveyard and end up kind of harvesting like something from another like track that wasn't really working but was sounding cool, and then trying to repurpose it into this other song that we're working on, whether it's like, change the timing and change the pitch and things like that. But we do that quite a lot, sometimes kind of frankensteining like maybe 3 or 4 songs into one song, and then it's cool because you can kind of end up with more unexpected results that way. Like if you end up combining the vocal melody from one song with like, the chords and bass line of something else completely, because you get kind of a more unexpected sounding thing where we would never come up with vocal melodies like that over top of that if we had started with it in the first place. So yeah, it does become handy for sure, having leftover bits.
That's cool. I love hearing stuff like that because I think that's really fun, and it also is not what people necessarily expect. I think that's
yeah.
You talked about happy accidents. I think that so much of the music we all love was created that way, and that's cool. I think when things get taken out of our hands, sometimes it's the best thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, like the Phil Collins like drum sound in the 80s, that was like, wasn't that like a weird accident with the talkback mic or something?
Exactly. Yeah.
It like changed music for the next 15 years.
How about Silk Spun?
Silk Spun. I think that was one of the songs that ended up being, a few different songs kind of combined together by the time it was all said and done. Like, I think we'd come up with maybe the chorus vocal, but it was like over top of something else entirely. And then I was working on something else that had that kind of more upward, like up-tempo kind of like driving rhythm to the drums, and combining that with what we already had, plus like I think even some bits from some other old demos and such. That one turned into sort of a mosaic, I guess, of like different ideas combining together, and it worked out pretty well, I think.
If there were a creature who'd sail over us, would they see what they see? The future and blackness above on the edge.
And I've probably skipped over your favorite songs on the record, so maybe if you want to pick one of those and talk about it, or one that you're still excited about now.
Sure. Yeah, I really like the opening track, Ruby Insides, and that's one of the rare ones for us that came together super quickly. Like often we'll kind of work on a song on and off, for upwards of a year, kind of tweaking different parts of it. But that one, the music, all the kind of elements and the lyrics, and the arrangement all came together just in maybe just like 2 days. And it didn't really change much after that. So that felt like, we don't really do that kind of thing very often, so it felt really rewarding. And it was just one of those things where like it just, everything feels really good as you're working on it, and almost kind of effortless. And I think the way we put that song together, it was another kind of accident where like when I first showed it to Megan, I think she didn't realize where I was intending the one to be. So she started writing all of her vocals starting on, I think like the second chord in the sequence, which then like made me hear the entire song differently, like as if the whole, if the whole song got shifted over, one measure, so that the second chord was actually the first chord. It suddenly kind of, it really changed the entire vibe of it, and kind of made the whole progression of it feel a bit more like, almost like it was going backwards or something like that, like less resolved. So we kept going with it that way because it just sounded more interesting. And then to get this sort of reversed vocal sound as well, we did reversing all of our vocals and then putting it through a reverb and then reversing that, so you get the get the trails of reverb that lead into the vocals itself. So I think having that through the entire song with this kind of strange progression that doesn't really start where you would expect it to, it kind of makes the whole track sound a bit uneasy and almost like it is playing backwards or something. So yeah, that one's one of my favorites.
Awesome. Good one. Well, and it got you a #1 record, so congratulations.
Thank you. On the electronic charts. Yeah. Yeah, we'll take it.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at tapop.com, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time.